Hello, so this is episode 7 of the Grief of Politics. I'm Joseph Carlson here with Avin Carroll. What is up, Avin?
Hello.
Hey.
Enjoying the beautiful weather.
Yeah, it is nice. It's not to the hot part of the year yet here in Washington, so it's a nice day today.
I get
so
2 months a year of this, so gotta enjoy it.
Yeah, gotta enjoy it because it's gonna get hot. So Avin, it was your turn to pick this month, and you chose abortion.
Yes.
There were several things. I think we said last time that there was some subjects that you were kind of going over, deciding what to talk about, and this was one of them. We will be announcing at the end of the episode, no more surprises. We will announce what we will be talking about next month because, then that leads to confusion because Avin didn't know if it was his turn or my turn. It was definitely his turn. He did have articles. He did come up with that. We worked it out. And then I was given from our second listener, I will say, who is a therapist. My therapist gave me some feedback. So we will talk about that near the end of the episode. You know, we do call this the Grief of Politics. I do want to tie it into grief because I think a lot of the stuff we talk about, there is grief involved in this. And I don't think it's just a branding thing with my other podcast. I think looking at this from how it affects more people kind of emotionally is, you can call me a touchy-feely liberal, but I think it's important to say that, to reiterate the fact that these things affect people's lives. Policy doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't, things don't, very few things in life have very little consequence for people. If there is a law passed, it will affect somebody in some way. So.
And this particular week, I think, is a great way for us to really try to pick up that theme because there is a lot of grief around this particular topic.
Yes. Some of that I've experienced.
Both ends of the spectrum. Like, it's just
right.
A lot of grief, a lot of emotion involved in this topic, which is why I was kind of hesitant to step into this. But I do think that there is so much dialogue on this particular topic that I think it's a good topic for us to address kind of early on in the differences between the more conservative-leaning versus the more liberal-leaning philosophies.
Right. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So I think really we should just start with the very first article you sent, which is procon.org, which I'm actually liking. We use that for another podcast. I think it's going to be a thing I'm going to go to because they do a good job of laying out pros and cons in like boxes of pro, con, and they're usually an equal number of pro and con. Mm-hmm. And they did obviously one on abortion. It seems like they do bigger topics, but I think this is the second time we've used them, maybe the third.
Second.
Yeah. So it's good. These are very good. So, this was updated on 5/9/2019. The author is always just procon.org. They give you a little background into Roe v. Wade and how this, pro-abortion, con-abortion came to be. And I read through all the pros and all the cons. I'm sure you did too. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the ones that kind of like jumped out at me from each category as opposed to going over, I think there's 13. There's 15 pros and 16 cons, so they're pretty even. But I'm not going to go over each one because we'd be here for 2 hours, and we have other articles to go over and arguments and stuff.
Correct.
So I would say, well, actually, you start because you chose the topic. In the pro category of this article, what were the pros that jumped out at you? I have basically one pro that I've highlighted and one con, but and when we talk about them, we actually will read them on what they are, but I don't want to go over all of them because there's a lot. So what pro jumped out at you when you were reading the pro argument for abortion?
Right off the top, the number one pro item and the number one con item, I think, are the biggest talking points we talk about. Number one pro, just kind of the bullet point of the article here, is the U.S. Supreme Court has declared abortion to be a fundamental right guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution.
Right.
I've always known it was protected as part of the Roe v. Wade decision, but I'd never actually heard the language of abortion is a fundamental right, which, in pause and consideration and thinking, reflection, like, hey, if the Supreme Court has said this is a protected thing, then they're saying it is a right based on constitutional law. But I'd never thought of that as a fundamental right. they go on and they give a little bit more description on the Roe v. Wade decision. Basically, well, not basically, I will read the little paragraph here real quick. It's the landmark abortion case Roe v. Wade, decided on January 22nd, 1973, in favor of abortion rights, remains the law of the land. Kind of poor wording there. The 7-2 decision stated that the Constitution gives a guarantee of certain areas or zones of privacy, and that this right of privacy is broad enough to encompass a woman's decision whether or not to terminate her pregnancy.
Right.
As a pro, that one, just like I said, right off the bat, number one stood right out, because I'd never actually considered abortion as a protected right.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously is kind of where this, I mean, that's why we're still having back and forth, right? Because on January 22nd, 1973, the Supreme Court ruled in Roe v. Wade that, basically what you just read, but there's a large portion of the population that disagrees with that,
Well, and that's true for any law that comes to the Supreme Court, right? Well, maybe not a large percentage of the population, but there's always a disagreement of whether or not that is protected in the Constitution.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the fact that you're conservative, and then you you're really well read and everything, and the idea that you're like, oh man, I never realized, I never thought of Roe v. Wade in that way. I thought it was just a court case to decide, but no, it's a constitutional right. That's what makes it such a milestone. So yeah, that was good.
I think that's true and really just thinking about that just now kind of reframes how I look at any Supreme Court decision from a constitutional law standpoint. Is basically, if the Supreme Court is protecting anything, then they are saying that it is a right.
Right. I mean, correct. Yes. I know what you're saying. No, I mean, that I don't think I really have anything to add. I mean, that did jump out at me, but I didn't write it down as my number one. What jumped out at you as a con when you were reading the article?
And again, that's why I said at the beginning of this, pro one, con one kind of stood out. I mean, con one is the number one kind of position from conservatives on why abortion should be illegal, why it should be banned, and that is, the bullet point, abortion is murder. To the vast majority of people, and not necessarily all, but the vast majority of people that stand against abortion, is by committing an abortion, you're taking a life, you're committing murder. And the standard argument for that, coming from evangelical Christianity and a lot of other religious kind of viewpoints, is that life begins at conception, and so if you're performing an abortion at any point, then you are taking a life, you are committing murder.
Yeah, that goes into con 2. That's exactly what it says. Life begins at conception, so unborn babies are human beings with a right to life. And there's a lot of things that I don't agree with ethically, but they are not illegal. So even though I disagree with them, I'm like, well, I disagree with that, but so be it, But I understand when it comes to life, people have views. Of course, everybody always brings up the death penalty, that, if you're pro-life, then even is, should you be pushing for the death penalty? Because there's some people that cross over in that direction of, yeah, we should put people to death, and, abortion is, but kids have a right to life. It's like, well, didn't that person have a right to life? Now, to me, that muddies the waters, because, maybe you're killing somebody that, anyway, I don't want to derail the thing. But yeah, I understand that argument, but even I've talked many times in the show that I try to listen to people on the right and understand where they're coming from. I understand what they're saying, and I don't agree with it. But to me, that's part of the thing of this is a mainstay of policy, and of course people's sticking points with whatever your religious views are or your party affiliation is. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I can't force you to feel a certain way about it. You can't force me to feel a certain way about it. So we have to basically go to pro number one and go, well, that's why we have a Supreme Court. They have decided that Roe v. Wade is a right, and I may not like it, if I'm conservative or Christian, but it doesn't mean, again, that doesn't mean that my wife has to get an abortion, or I have to get an abortion if you're a woman.
Correct.
Or, you know what I mean? So it's one of those things of like, I don't agree with it, but this is the law, so, it's a right. So that's to me where it stands with that. Again, that doesn't mean you have to agree with me. It's just like, well, like.
And I 100% kind of understand the argument, right? Like, this is a difference of opinion and definition. And I think that's the whole reason I wanted to have this conversation on this particular topic of abortion, is because I think there is a lot of very broad arguments and logic-based arguments that go around. And fundamentally, I don't think that this particular topic will ever end. I think it will be a constant argument in Western society, or at least the United States, for a very long time, because ultimately you're running into, secular members of society versus non-secular people of many various faiths that have a very different opinion on the definition of when life begins. And because of that, you're going to have many, many people that are arguing for the rights of women, and I am very much in favor of the rights of women. But you're going to have many people also arguing in favor of, like, you're committing murder. And both of those things are extremely passionate, very strongly held beliefs, and it ends up with this, like, basically never-ending debate that will, in my opinion, ebb and flow throughout all of society.
Time.
Yep.
Yeah. I do want to point out for the record, people don't know already, I mean, we're two white men, so that's obviously, we can have an opinion about this because we have spouses and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I just wanted to put that out there for everybody's like, who are you? Like, I don't know. We're white guys. But I'll just start with me. So the pro that stuck out with me would be it was pro number 8, which basically just said,
scroll down.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing the same thing. Because I was going to write all these down. I was like, wait a minute. I have the article up.
Mm-hmm.
Pro 8, abortion gives pregnant women the option to choose not to bring fetuses with profound abnormalities to full term. There's a lot of facts in the paragraph about fetal birth defects. I have experienced this. This is what happened to our, I have another podcast talking about grief, and I went through all the miscarriages, so this isn't like a new information, me sharing this, but if people don't listen to that, my wife and I she was pregnant. I don't like saying we're pregnant. I hate that, because no, you're not in some tank symbiosis thing. Like, your wife is pregnant, but you will be having a child. Anyway, we did experience this where the doctor came in, it wasn't looking good, and they said, if it's between you dying or the baby dying, we will choose the baby. So our middle child that passed away in the hospital, his lungs were not developed at all. They may have developed, but it wasn't good. It wasn't in a good place. And the doctor said, listen, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but this does not look good. So I'll say this. I can't judge someone for making these decisions, because I wouldn't want that kind of judgment to fall on, like, who am I to, when you're in the room having to make the decision, who am I to say you made the wrong decision or made the right decision? But with abortion and these kind of things, and we'll talk about later in other articles, this is hopefully if you're in a relationship or if you're alone, this is your right and decision to make, constitutionally protected under the Supreme Court decision. So you could sit there with the doctor and talk and say, what are my options? Which I have done. I've been in the room having to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I think abortion rights are important, because, I mean, that's just what I want someone else to have the ability to do this. And we'll bring another article in which definitely disagrees with this thing. But that's all I want to say. I mean, is there anything you want to say about that?
Well, and I mean, that argument has been brought up a lot. I think that's a very different consideration from a biblical standpoint. And if I'm wrong, obviously any of the members can get it right. But it is my understanding from a biblical viewpoint that the parents' lives are paramount to the lives of the children. So even from a biblical standpoint, the instinct to protect the baby, the desire to protect the baby for a mother, for a father, is extremely high. But biblically, it would be, from a Christian viewpoint only, and not speaking for any other faiths, more important to save the life of the mother over the child. So in that particular case, like, you're going to get more sympathy or more support. Con 8 directly refutes that, because of course the way pro-con structures, and I really like this, is they literally line up the one argument versus the other. So pro 8 versus con 8 brings up, though, that you know, for the health of the mother, in at-risk births, there's a reason to protect, but then there's also the birth defects we talked about here, like the baby may not be viable. Do you want to carry it to term? Right. There's the psychological side effects of that, like, carrying a baby to term and then losing it anyway. You kind of have a double grief scenario in that. So there's some
sure do.
But then you have the flip side of it, where they go into the slippery slope of moving into eugenics.
Well, I mean,
my kid's going to have Down syndrome, so I'm going to abort him.
But the problem with Con 8 is that that's the only example they give. And I would think most people, I believe that people are mostly good. I'm naive. And I would think if most people heard that their son or daughter had Down syndrome, they would just still be excited to have a kid. So, I mean, yeah, but my thing is, like, the exception rather than the rule. Like, to me, this is kind of a weird argument where you pull something that is unique to a situation instead of looking at the whole thing and saying, well, there's a lot of kids that have, like, no brain function or their heart isn't beating. And then there's kids that also have Down syndrome. Like, we can't have abortion just because of the babies that are aborted through Down syndrome, which I don't agree with. But to take me, in my opinion, an example of what happens. I mean, but you could look at this and say that happened to my wife and I. Most people have healthy babies; they don't have to make that decision.
Yep.
And it's it. But again, I guess if I'm for my wife and I being able to sit in a room and say, this comes down to the original argument, the pro and con one of, like, even though I don't agree with you and I greatly, totally disagree with you, if I totally disagree with you, but I guess we have to let you do this, which is terrible, but it's like, I don't want you to make fun of my decision or judge my decision for what I did, and I think it's weird. A lot of some of the cons, the problem that I had is they talked about, like, there was some biblical arguments in here, which seems strange when it comes to law, to say, like, well, the Bible says this and that. And it's like, okay, well,
the Bible forms a lot of opinion, though, right? So when you have the majority of the conservative right is coming on a moral-based law based off of their viewpoints of the world, based on their religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. Not exclusively. There are non-religious conservatives. I think of Jason Rance here in Seattle, who's conservative but not religious.
Right.
But I will also point out, in Con 8, the cons in this, I also agree with you, they're not fantastic, because a lot of them bleed into each other. They tend to be a little bit weaker than a lot of the pro arguments.
Right.
But again, that comes back to, in my own opinion, the real pro argument or con argument here starts right at the very beginning, and then a lot of it is so built off of and branched out of that. Like, I've never liked the argument that abortion shouldn't be used as contraception, not because I think that it should be, but because that breaks down the situation with abortion so far. Like, right. There are people out there who probably do use abortion as a form of contraception. Like, oh man, I messed up again. But, like, very few people. It's expensive. It's extremely strenuous on the body. Like, it's just not an easy thing for the body in the process, the way it works. So I've always seen that as sort of a weak argument. Anyway, in Con 8, the statistic actually listed refutes your position of people don't do that. It actually flat out says over 80% of women choose to abort Down syndrome babies.
Well, I mean that.
which seems
Yeah, but
extremely
that
high.
that was an old figure though, because
It is from 1989
between
to 2005, and I didn't read the study, so I don't know the specifics. So I would only hope that the Britannica-procon.org would
they
be
probably did.
pulling
I would imagine they did.
pretty good to look at it. The other point I would make, like I haven't gone through that difficult process, and that's one of the reasons that I appreciate having this conversation with you, because you guys have had that difficult
Right.
part. Like Lisa and I have only been married for a
And
year and a half.
again, just really quickly for the record, I told my wife about this. She's like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
so,
it's extremely difficult, right? And like for you guys, you
well, I mean, we're
really-
going to therapy.
you
So,
really, really want to have kids.
yeah, I mean,
And at this point,
well,
yeah,
I mean,
we
we're
don't
at
need
the-
to
we're
delve
at
into
the-
that too far. But
No, I mean, yeah, it's going to go on and on. But I think what I want to do is bring in the next article, because we could go off this pro and con all back and forth all day. It was by the AP, by Julie Carr Smith, and it just came out 2 days ago. So way to go on that, Avin. Usually they come out, we find something from a long time ago. Anyway, it seems like reading this article, the idea was before, like a woman is in a clinic getting a abortion, the doctor basically has to tell her, hey, before you do this, there is a way to stop. You need to tell me, and we can stop it. There's some drugs you can take. By reading this, it doesn't seem intrusive. It just seems like they want to make sure that women have all the information before they decide to, have an abortion.
so as
I
I
don't
read
understand
through
what the...
as I read through the whole article, it's not a very long article. My understanding of it is the way that this bill has been introduced to, how do they put it? Basically, further informed consent, or as a support of informed consent. It specifically applies to abortion pill and chemical-induced abortion. And so what they're talking about specifically is that when a woman goes back in for the second pill in the abortion pill process, that the doctors need to inform that patient that, hey, this can be stopped, this can be reversed. The big controversy in this article, and if you read through the article, again, this is one of those ones where I'm like, if you read through the whole article, the big kind of controversy on it is the research behind, hey, we can reverse this, the first pill, is that the research behind reversing is very shaky.
Oh. I did read it, but maybe I just didn't pick up on that. But I will say...
I read it right before we called, so.
Okay. The idea of just making sure that everybody has all the information, and I think, that's kind of all. The only thing I do want to kind of call you out for this other article, which I'll just bring it in now because it kind of it ties into the last article. It's by LifeSite, which one thing I want to point out, the tagline, the article is from LifeSite. It's called "Why Closing Clinics," with quotes, saves lives. Study finds fewer abortions when women have to travel. And it says the JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, found that increased distances to abortion centers are associated with lower abortion rates. Anyway, just to let you know, LifeSite News did have to put a disclaimer on the news thing saying they have been banned from YouTube. So I'm just putting that out there. I know there's a lot of big tech stuff right now that people are involved in, but they basically had to disclaim their own news story. But yeah, this article right here ties into the last article, I think, in a way, because it's the idea that you have to travel farther to get abortions. It's harder to get abortions because you have to travel farther, and the abortion rates drop because people had to travel farther and they couldn't, which is true. I don't see anything to dispute that. I think what people on the left are saying is that because of this, one of the procon.org things brought up is that it leads to less safe abortions, which leads to more health problems. So by making these clinics available, tying it into the last article, you would be able to get more information from a doctor if a clinic was closer by. You would be able to go back for the second pill or a follow-up visit. You would get better health care, is basically the argument for keeping clinics around. Is the idea that,
They don't go into any of those counter statistics in this article, which I thought was pretty interesting. But also, I mean, this particular article I chose on purpose. I wanted to have one on each kind of side of the argument, right? Mm-hmm. Pro-con's pretty neutral. And the
Ohio
article and
the reverse one was kind of like, this happened.
Yep.
Like, it was kind of like...
But it does bring up, like, the Ohio decision does kind of bring up, like, just how passionate people really are about this argument. Like, legitimately, people are super up in arms about a woman being told, hey, by the way, we can reverse this if you're not feeling comfortable going all the way through with it.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, you can't tell them that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing. I think as long as it isn't some, like, you have to watch a slideshow and fill out a quiz.
Right.
If the nurse or doctor comes in and says, hey, we just want to make you aware, and I have to give you a pamphlet, if you don't want to go through this, here's...
I mean, there's been pushback on abortions, that abortion clinics be required to provide mothers with literature on support. Like,
oh, yeah.
there's been court fights about giving women at abortion clinics documentation about local support networks to support them if they choose to have the baby. Because
yeah, I mean, that is one of the things I didn't bring up in my cons, but, like, they do talk about future medical problems, not only physical but mental, about going through therapy and stuff.
Yeah.
If somebody's gone through an abortion. So, yeah, it's all important. My thing with this LifeSite article is that it's like, yeah, if you don't provide a clinic nearby, you can't get an abortion, and it is harder for you to go to places to get an abortion. So, of course, the abortion rate would drop. You know, like, it just seems like...
And I would further want to look at the JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. Right. I would further want to look at the JAMA research to see if they discuss self-abortions. Because they do talk about the statistic of, like, hey, abortion rates went down by 20% when you move the abortion clinic this distance away. And they talk about that in depth. But they talk about birth rate goes up 3%. So does that mean that, like, that 17% difference is either being more careful in contraception, or are there self-abortions going on?
I mean, this is only anecdotal, so I don't really want to bring it in. But I know that when I was in Asia, there was very little... I talked to people, they had very little sex education. And so abortions were more common, from what I heard.
One of the other statistics they talk about in here is when access to the abortion clinic goes down, but when there is still access to, like...
contraception or...
Not contraception, but when there's access to, like, family planning centers.
Oh, yeah.
Contraception rates go up by 8%, or birth control goes up by 8% or something like that. So it's one of the other things that they talk about. But no, they don't go into the statistics of, like, self-aborted medical cases in these areas when it happens.
Again, I mean, we're putting this on the podcast, but, like, I have talked to people that have had abortions, and from my wife and I's perspective, it makes me sad because she is not able to have a kid. Like, we've had nothing but negative results. And so when people are like, yeah, we had to do this, or we had to get an abortion, that makes me sad. Am I mad at them? Like, I'm disappointed. I wish they wouldn't do that, because obviously we would love to have a kid. But at the end of the day, it is a constitutional right that is protected to them, given to them, by the Roe v. Wade decision. Like, again, does it make me incredibly happy? No, it makes me really sad, but it is not my decision. It is not, I don't live with them. I'm not in a relationship with, like, it doesn't have anything to do with me, So it's one of those things where you're like, well, I mean, yeah, you had to do what you had to do, but part of me is like, darn it, So this, again, comes to the pro one, which is, like you said, this is a constitutionally protected right. It sucks. And I think this is a good time to bring in the third article, which I'll let you start, because this will actually lead in. Go ahead. So the last article is from the LA Times. It looks like it was published on Friday, July 16th, 2021 by
Friday.
Yeah, Carolyn Petro Cohen. It's called "Opinion: Texas Wants Its Citizens to Enforce a New Abortion Ban, and We Should All Be Concerned." So let me know. What did you think about this? Reading it, obviously you brought this into the podcast, so you do want to talk about it. So what did you think about this whole?
Again, like the fervor, the passion, the power behind people's viewpoints on this particular topic is so high. This particular article is actually really concerning to me because, like, bringing the citizenry of Texas into this enforcement process is kind of like some legal trickery. So basically, this article is going over the Texas legislature has passed a bill where the state is not enforcing their abortion laws. Instead, what they are doing is they are making it legal.
Citizens. They're deputizing citizens, basically.
Kind of, which is also why, like, I understand the extreme concern that this could actually go through, and the crazy precedent that this sets as well. And they discuss that in this opinion piece as well. They're making it legal for anyone who finds out that a woman has had an abortion to sue the parties involved, excluding the mother. So they have immunized the mother from legal ramifications. She can't be directly sued, but the doctors, the clinic, the people at the clinic can be sued by private citizens. So it could be the father, but it could also be
a neighbor,
mother-in-law, neighbor, your local barista that they highlight in there. Like, it could be anyone that finds out that you had an abortion in Texas. If this goes through. Now, it doesn't go into law until September, and of course there's already challenges to it. We'll see where it goes.
One of the things that jumped out to me in the article, I'll just read it. It says, in case Texans aren't motivated to go to court, there's also a $10,000 reward for anybody who wins one of these lawsuits, effectively putting a litigation ban on the head of the...
Scariest part of it.
Right. Yeah,
I
so
cut
they're
you
basically
off in the
saying...
Sorry.
Yeah,
putting a ban
no, I mean, that's basically...
on the head of
they're putting
providers.
Right. So, like, if a doctor gets sued, it's like, oh, you won for whatever reason. Here's your $10,000. So, yeah, it to me, that's like, oh my God. And then a lot of people wrote in here that they're basically trying to get around a federal review because it's like state, and then by deputizing people, it makes it very difficult for the federal government to come in and
so
go
again,
through the normal.
You're not deputizing people. Like, you don't have any legal authority to go out and arrest this person or anything. You have the right to sue if you choose, and they've incentivized it, which I don't like. The incentivizing is bad, period. Right. And it sets a terrible precedent across the board, and let alone the right to sue a person for it from, like, any person to do it. Like, for that matter, it could be, you know, a scorned ex-boyfriend from 10 years earlier finds out that, you know, this girl that left him.
The worst case scenario that I can imagine would be somebody that's abusive and finds out that, you know, this you don't, in the situation where you don't want your child to be in that situation, and this person's violently and physically and emotionally abusive, and you get out of the relationship, and then you find out you're pregnant, and for whatever reason you decide, I don't want to keep the baby. I can't do this.
I think of the episode of Firefly.
Yeah.
With the father so desperately trying to kidnap his newborn baby.
Yeah. No, but I mean, again, that is their choice to do that. So it's like, okay, well, then does that mean the ex-husband can go after you and then wins? Like, that's...
It doesn't go after the mother. She is protected and immunized. It goes after the providers.
Right.
But there's still a very vindictive
well, the idea is
that mother gets dragged into this. Hopefully not, but I'm sure, like, there's interviews and
they're going after
exposure.
Yeah, but what they're trying to do is de-incentivize doctors and clinics, right? So, like,
correct.
You keep getting fines, you keep getting paid, your insurance goes up, and your insurance company, the doctor's insurance, is like, you can't perform these procedures anymore because your bond and insurance is through the roof, and there's no way we can pay for you to do these, because if you do one of these, it'll be
or they've raised their rates high enough that they can cover that on a case-by-case basis, but then that only excludes.
And then you don't have to worry. Yeah, and then you don't have to worry about clinics being too far apart. You have to worry about the procedure not being affordable to do the procedure. So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, I disagree, and I just said I disagree with people to go through this, like, for personal reasons. But I understand it's something that it's not my decision. You know, it's like, okay, well, you did what you did, but I wish you would have made another choice, but here we are. Like, and I don't judge them. I mean, I do initially when I hear about it, and then I take a step back and say, well, again, this isn't my whatever. I've heard of laws anecdotally from other states going through where they, I think there was one in Ohio or somewhere where it's basically like police can start asking questions about how your child, like if there was a miscarriage on the hospital, like what happened, and they can start asking you questions. So like having to deal with the grief of losing a kid and then having to deal with a detective asking you questions about, well, we had a miscarriage and, it wasn't an abortion. And, that to me is also troubling. And so
a lot of ramifications when you head into some of these laws, right? And this is because of Roe v. Wade and the very low likelihood that it would ever get turned over. Legislatures, policy groups, lobby groups that are pro-life are looking for any and every way that they can to find a legal mechanism to ban abortion, right, or to at least de-incentivize as much as they can. And that level of passion comes from, like, again, the very beginning argument, like kind of the most important, powerful reason that right. people stand against abortion, which is they view abortion as murder. Beneficially, we haven't had it happen in a couple of decades, at least not at the scale that we saw for a while. But that's why in the 90s, people were burning down and killing abortion doctors,
right,
and burning down abortion clinics because...
Which is ironic that they were
right.
pro-life and then would like shoot a doctor. And you're like, wait, okay. That's like doubling down on murder almost. Like, I'm not only going to just kill someone, I'm going to kill somebody with the ability to save someone's life. Like, that seems like a double whammy kind of in a way. Like, you kind of overshot a little bit. Yeah, I mean, all this kind of stuff, again, even if I don't agree with it, like you and I have differences when it comes to religion or whatever, I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. I have enough fortitude to walk away. And you know what
Joe,
I mean?
You're a moron, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start insulting you personally for this one belief.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to use.
You drive a slow car.
It is pretty slow. It's dying.
Well, yeah. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to bring
It's gonna die soon. No, I mean, my idea is that I think my big epiphany, and I told you this on the phone before we recorded this a while ago, was what I've realized lately is like Ben Shapiro. I bring him up a lot. I do watch his show, or as much as I can without being paywalled. And his idea is that, facts don't care about your feelings, and that if everything was in a vacuum, people would not base their decisions on emotions. They would base it on facts. What he's saying is true, right? But we're all human beings with different experiences, with different whatever. It's very difficult to take your emotions out of a thing when you have to make a decision. Talking about this subject, I obviously had a lot of emotions about it. But because of the things that have happened to me, that's when you start reading and researching the facts of like these pro-con articles of how does reproductive health or abortion clinic rights, how do they help women? They give them contraception and information. They provide free services, not just abortion services, but they do cancer screenings. Again, there was another thing that I didn't bring up in the pro-con article. One of the pros was the fact that it is less of a tax burden on people if people are allowed to have abortions, because all these unwanted kids with welfare is a strain on the system. If abortion was illegal, it would increase the national debt. Like, there's all these knock-on effects of allowing abortion to be legal. And I think the situation I had not only made me look at it in a different situation, but reading how it affects other people with facts, as Ben Shapiro would say. And I'd just like to point out for the fact, I don't want to rip on Ben Shapiro, but you cannot say facts care about your feelings when you're deeply orthodox religious and bring up how you feel about religion and how that's how to interpret the law, because that's not how the law works. I mean, like you said, it gives nods to the law, but it is not 100% influenced by the law. So I get really mad when he says
we aren't a theocracy.
Yeah. So I get really mad when he says facts don't care about your feelings, because I'm like, man, you're talking about your feelings deciding how this, and again, my feelings informed a certain way that I feel, but it makes me want to be more informed about what is really going on in the world and what is happening, as opposed to, you see the world one way or another way after an event, like a before and after. And so I think for me, that's what it was saying, okay, so this happened to my wife and I, how many other people has this happened to? How does it affect them? How would having a clinic like this affect my wife and I? Having access to healthcare is important. Like, all that stuff's important. It's all knock-on effects. It's important, So again, even though I disagree with people when they say, I got an abortion because it makes me sad for our situation, that's not my situation. It's their situation, and they have a constitutionally protected right to do that. So
and I think, as I said, this is an argument that'll go on in our society forever. You and I aren't going to solve it. Government isn't going to solve it. Like, no one in particular is going to solve.
I will say, as a left-leaning guy, sorry to interrupt, I know people say that the government can't solve it. Not really, but the government can put in, like, guardrails in a way to say, this is what you can't do. You can't do this. Because...
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, and that's, like, we're a government structured on a constitution and common law practices, right? Like, whatever the decision is sets precedents, and then that's how we continue to enforce it. I think the really difficult part for everyone in the United States on this particular topic, and it's never going to happen because, despite Ben Shapiro's argument that we need to rely on facts,
he's right.
Very powerful, cold, hard fact that ignores is that human beings are irrational and emotional creatures.
Yeah,
and
that's
the biggest fact of all in government.
Again, his thesis of, if everything was in a vacuum, it would be perfect, and if we use the facts, it's like, yeah, you're right, but, like, that's not how the world works. That's like, you're basically boiling it down to, like, yeah, of course, if we could just look at the facts and make a law based on the facts, we would be fine.
Right.
But that's not how the world works. That's not how the party system that we have works. That's not, none of that works that way. I mean, you're seeing with this law, the Texas law, like, you know what? People won't stop getting abortions, so we're going to make it so difficult for them financially to get an abortion. They're just not going to want to do it. It's the reverse kind of blockade of that.
And this is, I talk about it all the time. This is a case of legislated morality.
Right.
We in the United States do not live in a theocratic government. My moralistic and religious viewpoints are mine, and I share them with many people, but it doesn't matter if I share them with 90% of Americans or 10% of Americans. I have no right, power, or authority to impose my views or beliefs on you. And that's freedom of religion here in the United States, right? Like, you can believe whatever you want to believe. We're going to come to these common practices of law to keep our society functioning, and you can practice your religion as you see fit.
Right.
And I think, in a Ben Shapiro perfect world, the only solution to this, and it won't happen, but in this vacuum, the solution to this is everyone sits together and they all agree this is the point where a life is defined as a living human being, and any abortion past here is abortion and anything before here is not. It just won't ever happen, right?
Again, I agree.
Right now it's 24 weeks. Roe v. Wade allows 24 weeks.
Right. Which is a lot of time. There was, I think, was it this Texas law? Basically, it was after 6 weeks or something that's when it was illegal to.
No, the Texas law is just period. They talk in that article about it. They talk about states that have been passing laws that are at heartbeat.
I know. Again, I'm a white male, but the situations I've been through with my wife, you don't know it. You barely know at 6 weeks if you're pregnant, you don't know. So like there, that's
It's heartbeat bills. You hear about it a lot. It's when the heartbeat is happening, then they're trying to make the case that is when this is a human being and we can't kill it. There's, when is it viable to live, which is...
I mean, my take on that is, like, you do know in the third trimester, but, I mean, for me, between that, you wouldn't know, until the doctor says, all right, it's looking good. It's looking good,
And, I have a very good friend, and him and his wife are very deeply devout in their faith. So they opted, obviously, to keep going through with it. But they ran into and had to face the very deep and powerful emotional ramifications of finding out that their child had a genetic birth defect in an early genetic test. And it's, I'm not going to go into the details for risk of exposing who this person is.
Well, they're not here to tell their story too. So.
Correct. But it was a very powerful, meaningful thing, and what it really came down to is their child was going to have a very low likelihood of surviving after birth. I mean, it was statistically significant enough that I personally think most parents would want to go through, because I think it was like 80-20, 20% survival chance or something like that. I could be wrong in the numbers. But still, even if the baby did survive, was going to have severe mental issues and extreme physical health issues for its whole life. And they opted to continue to push through. And their baby was born, had none of the major defects that they thought it was going to have from the genetic test. Had one very minor and extremely easy to treat birth defect. And they now have an absolutely adorable, wonderful, energetic, smiley baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's the improbability of it all. You know, it's like what do we do? It's like, well, we're gonna try. You know,
and that's kind of the ultimate thing. Like, you don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of other arguments on abortion you can go down. Like, oh well, what if you killed Hitler? You know, and all the other aspects of it. But ultimately,
I kind of have the feeling with Hitler there would have been another person that was as bad, that was kind of just waiting. I mean, events might not have happened the way we were, but like, there would have been somebody else. There's always, to quote the Phantom Menace, there's always a bigger fish. There's always some other person around the corner that's like, this person is equally as horrible, if not,
Hitler recruited in a lot of other people that shared his beliefs and pushed his agenda forward. And he couldn't have done it alone. He did not do what he did in a vacuum.
If only he would just would have gone to art school. Just let him in. It'd be funny if there was one person admitting him in, going, I think we should just let him in. I'm kind of getting a bad vibe. Like, something bad could happen. We just let him in. We just tutor him on painting.
Bring him up.
Yeah, we'll get some tutorial.
Love and Robots or whatever on Netflix when they do their little...
Oh, yeah.
Hypothetical Hitler thing.
Yeah, I don't know. My thing with abortion, again, I mean, I agree with you, but I definitely respect your right to do it. We're getting near the end, but just to let everybody know, so, I mean, I think we've already talked about it in the episode. I don't think I need to bring another article. To make someone, especially with this Texas thing, if it goes through, to go through the pain, again, I believe in the best of people. If you go through that for whatever reason, you get an abortion, and then you're talking to your barista, your neighbor, where they're like, oh, I haven't seen you in a couple of days. Like, I've been in the hospital, had some problems. We decided to abort the baby because it had a genetic birth defect. That neighbor being able to go to, a lawyer and sue your doctor is very troubling. And I think it's strange from conservatives who talk about, liberty, allowing someone to live their life.
It sets a terrible, terrible precedence for other types of law. It sets a terrible precedent.
Yeah, and to me, I wouldn't want to judge anybody, again, for making the decisions that they make. I want them to have the right to do it, because I think one thing in Christianity that isn't talked about, well, I mean, it's probably talked about. I don't know. I don't go to church. You could speak up. This is your area of expertise. But I believe people are good, and I believe if you go through something like that, an abortion, you are also thinking about it. It's not something that happens that you never think about. I think that this idea of, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones and all that, the idea that you're going to carry it with you for a while, and then, they're still going to think about it, and it's going to affect their life. And so, again, I think you judging them is probably not as bad as them judging themselves. I know with my wife and I, we go through this all the time in therapy, and I'm just being open and honest. What if we didn't decide to, we didn't abort our baby, but it was like we kind of let it go in a way. And so it's like, well, what happened if we would have let it, whatever, and we'll never know. But it's something that I don't want someone to judge me to like, oh, you made a horrible decision. It's like your friends had the same thing where they're like, well, we're going to do it. We're going to roll the dice. They could have went the other way and said, we don't want to put our kid under that. And I would never come forward and be like, that's dumb that you did that. It's like that was their choice in the room to make when they were talking to each other. They probably consulted the Bible or talked to fellows in church and said, this is the decision we want to make, So again, it's a constitutionally protected right. No matter what kind of misgivings I have about it, people have the right to do that. So that's kind of my final thoughts. And again, the grief of having to go back after people that have gone through this, like either through law enforcement, like people, cops asking you about miscarriages, or people filing lawsuits. Like imagine being home going, I don't know if I made the right decision, and talking with your spouse, maybe going to therapy, and then all of a sudden you get you've been served papers. Like somebody comes up and serves you for that. It's like, what? Like having to go through that all
Even
over
if
again
you
is
don't, like there's just they talk about it in the pro con. One of the big cons is the psychological effect and the grief that people carry in their lives as they go through with it. I've personally known someone who had an abortion. That was a much older person, fully grown adult, and talked to them, and they were like, no, it was the smartest thing ever. Like my whole life would have been messed up. This is like, I don't have any remorse about it at all. And
Right.
I've never met anyone that's had an abortion that has expressed a deep level of remorse or grief where they've had to carry that guilt. But I've seen interviews of it, and it's a deeply powerful grief.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea that, again, I don't want to be in the room making that decision for them, and like you said, they're going to carry it with them for a while. Hopefully, those people found therapy, or someone to talk to, a priest or pastor or somebody, because to carry that with you without an outlet is terrible. That's one of the things they brought up with. It leads to more. I think it was in the cons of that original article. It leads to suicide. It leads to all kinds of stuff because you just don't have that outlet, and you maybe haven't made the best decision. Again, it goes to.
Even in the article about the Texas bill, as they talk about, like, by coming up with this bill, you're isolating people.
Right.
Because
you're
no
never
going to want to talk to anyone.
Yeah. And then too, with the clinics, just to give people pamphlets to say, hey, there's a support group down the street if you want to talk about what happened or whatever. Just to have that. Of like, maybe it's that person, like you said, that was like, oh, I'm totally fine with it. I don't have any. Maybe that day or the following couple of weeks are like, going to the support group and talking to the people going, no, it is, here's why X, Y, and Z, and just a talk with people that have gone through it, instead of making those clinics harder to go to and harder to find, and then, make it as easy as possible. So, I mean, I guess that's my final thoughts is, I guess I summarized it in the first couple minutes. I may not agree with your decision, but you have a right to do it,
Yep.
And I live in America. You have the right to do it. I could sit there and curse you. Again, I don't think I hold any big grudges to the few people I've heard that have done it, because some of them are still in my life. It was just at the moment you hear the story and think, darn it. But I'm not like, I'm like, well, you made the decision, and it is what it is. So.
And I think, for me, at least personally, I think it's worth putting out that I'm with you in that same camp, right? Like, I don't agree with the decision, but I'm definitely not going to condemn you or judge you for making that decision, right? Like, it's the decision you felt you had to make.
Yeah.
People change, people grow, they learn more things, and they keep moving forward. And even if I think that it was the wrong choice, it was your choice, not mine.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it, it is a choice. That's the way I look at it. I don't say it's wrong. I'm just like, I mean, that's a choice. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have done it, but.
Now, maybe in this particular case, I guarantee you, Joe, there are places where you would say, yes, that is a wrong decision.
Oh, yeah, probably. I haven't heard every situation yet, though. I'm sure somebody will. So, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, we're coming to the end. I mean, that's kind of our final thoughts. But I did want to tell everybody that it is my choice next month, and we've been nibbling around the edges of it, and this last article is a great way to talk about it. I want to talk about the great state of Texas and what a strange experiment it has been over the past year. Avin lived in Texas, so we have another expert. I was a quasi-expert this episode. Avin can tell me all about Texas. This article just put the go sign on the next episode because I was like, here's another one. There's another one. We heard about the power thing that happened in the winter all the way up until the weird court case that they tried to stop the election results when was it Abbott? It was somebody in Texas, right? Didn't they say like, oh, you really need to look at Pennsylvania's vote tally and stuff? I don't know if it was
It might have been
Abbott. I don't know, but it was someone in Texas, maybe an attorney, and you're like, that is so strange. And then this, obviously, of like, hey, why don't we just give people incentive to sue people, like with money? You're like, what? This is a weird place. We talked about it on the phone before this. There's a law going through. I don't know if it's gone through yet. You basically don't need to go through a class to carry a concealed weapon, which and the weirdest thing I heard about this was somebody going, well, I mean, it'll take a couple years for it to work itself out. And I thought, what? That's a weird take on people just carrying firearms around. So I think that's what I want to talk about. Well, that's what I will talk about next month. And then Avin, again, no surprises. Avin will tell us what he will pick the following month. So I think with that is it. Avin, is there anything you want to plug before we leave?
I mean, same thing as always. Run my kind of real estate referral business on the side. Youragentguide.com. If you're looking for a real estate agent that you can actually trust, will be experienced and professional. That's what I do. I help people do that.
Yeah, you're spending more time doing that now too. You've committed more to it. So, yes. Have you had any more videos out? Any more?
I have not. I need to start working on...
I feel bad because I'm your friend. I will not... I mean, we're not really in the market to look for a house, but unless you tell me, hey, can you look at this and let me know what you think, I don't look at your videos. So if you... Yeah, I know. He's giving me the shock face, everybody. Yeah. So go there if you're looking for a house. I mean, I've known Avin for a long time. He will definitely help you. And so, I think what am I working on? Okay, yes. So I would like to plug my other podcast, Gaming with Grief. If you could tell from this discussion, we talk a lot about a lot of cool things on there. It's mostly just me yelling at a mic. I do have guests on. It's basically trying to examine grief in video games, so games that have to deal with death or loss or the ones that don't make sense, like a big project I'm working on. I don't want to announce it because it's me actually reading novels and researching and then playing the game, which is like a 60 to 80 hour game, so it's going to be rough. I just finished a playthrough of a smaller game, though, because I've been feeling sad lately and wanted to talk about sadness and the difference between sadness and grief. But yeah, that's Gaming with Grief podcast with Joseph Carlson. It hits every Monday morning at 7 a.m. You can find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. Just search for the Gaming with Grief podcast. It's on Apple and the Google Play Store. So I think, is that it, Avin? I think we plugged everything. We did everything. We did the stuff. We plugged stuff. We told people next month we will be talking about Texas. It is my turn to pick. I even wrote that in my notes with a big exclamation point, and I hate Texas. Exclamation points. I hate them so much. I hate exclamation points, but when I wrote Texas down, I had to write an exclamation point.
When you write out "I hate exclamation points," do you put an exclamation point at the end of that sentence?
No, because I hate them. So, no, I'm just telling you I hate exclamation points, and for me to write Texas exclamation point made my hand shake because it's crazy. So yeah, I think that's it, guys. I think that's it for this month, and we will see you guys next month. See you later.
Sounds good.